You are listening to Nerd Best Friends, a podcast that covers the nerdy conversations you're already having, or wish you could. It's the nerdiest thing you'll do this week.
Welcome back, nerds. This is your nerd best friend, Analese.
And I'm Rob.
I'm Dr. Intern Joan.
We are so excited to have you back here for some summer fun. Starting our summer series, reading Chew Volume 1 and 2. But before we get to all of that, let's just do some check-ins. How are we doing, nerds?
I'm doing okay. It's real busy, but there's a lot going on in the nerd spheres because summer is coming and all the conventions are happening and we're getting announcements of nerd movies and nerd books and new products and all that kind of thing. So there's lots to pay attention to and there's lots of stuff to get done. I'm a little overwhelmed at times, but overall pretty good. How are you doing?
You gotta pick your lane, Rob. I know the Buffy reboot's coming out, so I'm following real close on what's happening.
There's so much coming out about that all at once, and it's so hard now because it's really hard to determine what's real and what's not. Like, there was a whole fake casting list that came out. Did you see that?
No.
Joan? It was like a fake casting list, and people put it out there like, these are the characters they're looking for the Buffy reboot, and someone had to come out and say, no, this is not a thing. So it's really hard to know what's real and what's not real because people are chasing likes and breaking news and everyone's TMZ now, and people just make up stuff and post it as real, and then it just gets shared and shared and shared, and like, it's pretty bonkers.
Interesting to see how popular it is. Like, people wouldn't waste their time trying to get clicks on AI generated BS if there weren't millions of people following the stories.
That is definitely one of the interviews I saw Sarah Michelle Gellar have, is just talking about how you have the original fan base from the 90s, but how newer generations are also watching it, and it's still resounding with, the 16 to 24-year-old girls, and how it has just grown exponentially that people are clamoring for this reboot. It is really interesting. And it seems like so much content on my For You pages has turned into Buffy stuff. More Buffy podcasts, more Buffy news. I mean, I think it's only going to crescendo even more, just like the end of the school year is crescendoing. The big one right now was a post from Sarah Michelle Gellar in which they've gone through an audition process for what we're assuming to be the new Chosen One or a new Slayer, and her offering that via like FaceTime or something, offering that to the actress. So that was a really cool clip to see of this young actress losing her mind that Sarah Michelle Gellar is asking her to save the world with her.
I cried like a baby. I was like,
Yeah,
yes, I'm cool. 150% in this.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. But also, I'm very happy for you that you're so excited about this show that's coming out.
You're going to love it.
Your face is ridiculous.
Let's get into some nerd news right now. We just talked about the Buffy reboot and how we have the new Slayer. I'm super excited because releasing recently was the trailer for The Long Walk. Have either of you seen this trailer?
I have not seen it, but I've seen it compared to the Hunger Games, which I'm super obsessed with. Sunset, whatever it is, the newest one. So tell us more.
Yeah. Have you seen it, Rob?
I have not seen it, but I did hear probably two different other podcasts that I listened to were talking about it.
Yeah, it's really exciting. So The Long Walk is part of a series of books and short novellas that Stephen King released a long time ago under the pen name Richard Bachman. And he did it at the time because eventually, once his big classic horror stuff came out in the 70s and early 80s, people were like, yeah, Stephen King can publish his laundry list and grocery list and make it a bestseller. So he sent some books out under Richard Bachman. This is one of them. And The Long Walk is very dystopian. It's very Hunger Games-esque, although it came before Hunger Games. So you can say Hunger Games is Long Walk-esque, but I will say that I read it when we were in high school. So I read it about 30 years ago, and the movie of it has been playing in my head ever since because it just lends to be a good movie. And it's really exciting that it's finally gotten there after decades of will it or won't it, will it or won't it, oh maybe, oh no. This is one of those that many Stephen King fans for a very long time have been waiting for it to be turned to a film. So yeah, the basic premise, which they give away in the trailer, I was kind of disappointed how much they gave away in the trailer, because one of the shocking things about the story is if you don't know, you read and then it's a shock. But it's basically 100 boys from a certain age, teenager to young adult. They volunteer to do the long walk, and the winner of the long walk gets everything they want for the rest of their lives. You walk until there's one person remaining. And so there's no like finish line until there's only one person remaining. And they have this whole set of rules that you have to keep a certain mile per hour pace. And then you get 3 warnings. And when your 3rd warning's up, they end you. And so it's this competition that gets more psychologically thrilling and interesting as people go through this competition. Where it's set, you're following the main character, Ray Garrity. And yeah, it's all fun and games and weird until it becomes real. But it's at the time you're watching this long walk with Ray Garrity, it's been around for years and years and years and years. So what happens is not a surprise to them, and they joke about it until it starts happening and getting real. I mean, they've got an amazing scriptwriter, they have an amazing director, and I'm excited.
It also has the lottery vibes. Remember that story we read when we were younger in school?
Yes, I love that one. That's a Ray Bradbury story, isn't it?
Shirley Jackson, but okay. It's
Okay.
Ray Bradbury. I don't know.
Help me remember this.
When you're in junior high, there's some like story where the town, there's a big lottery and everybody's excited about it, and they like dress up and they go into the square and somebody draws the paper and it's got the black circle on it. That's the winner, and they like celebrate the family, and then they take the person who got the thing and they stone them to death.
Yeah, I don't remember that. But yeah, that sounds like Icewind Dale.
Big vibes.
Big D&D turn there. But yeah, so that trailer's come out. We're getting crescendo talk about Superman. Now we're heading into the summer blockbusters coming out. Yeah, any nerd news on your ends that you're excited coming up in the summer?
You covered it for me. Never Flinch will have come out by the time that this airs. And so Analese
Never Flinch came out yesterday based on well, it depends. If it goes out to the Patreons a couple days early, Never Flinch comes out tomorrow. And for everyone who's listening to this live on the 20th, it came out yesterday and it's in my hands right now. Future me is not listening to the podcast. I am nose and book on the next bit of the Holly Gibney series. I've been calling it a trail. I don't know what else to call it. Oh, that's so exciting. Except Costco doesn't sell books anymore. And that's really annoying.
Costco doesn't sell books anymore. They got rid of their big tables. They got rid of their book tables. Full of books. Huh, how about that?
Which is really sad.
Although I did see in one of these cities I was driving through, like the opening of a new Barnes & Noble.
Book Talk brought back Barnes & Noble.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing. I'm not on TikTok at all, but apparently like there was so much hype about Barnes & Noble that.
Yeah. Like I thought Barnes & Noble was like, well, there's a few that still exist, so they're not, they're fading out. But no, like a brand new humongous Barnes & Noble open. I was like, grand opening? What's going on here? They also did not have any of the limited edition special cover D&G Dungeon Master Guide that I'm looking for. But it was worth going in there and seeing because they got a tons of D&D stuff.
Where was it?
Can't remember. Down south. You know how like when you get into LA County and there's like a bazillion.
You're just there, yeah.
Everything's like a Santa this and a Santa that.
All right. Well,
I'm just looking forward to Superman in July. Like that's something I'm still not going to get jaded and cynical about. I'm like, this Superman movie's going to be great and I'm going to love it. Gosh dang it. I didn't watch the last trailer that came out in May. I'm like, nope, I don't want to see it. I just want to go into this movie and have my heart be full of Superman goodness.
I mean, we're going to watch it and do a movie review, nerd movie review shortly after it opens.
Yes, and it's going to be amazing because I'm either going to have gotten everything I wanted and I'm going to be excited and happy and it's going to be an amazing movie review, or once again, my childhood dreams and hopes are going to be ground into the ground like a cigarette butt and I'm going to come on and be the most bitter, angry person in the world. It's really great. You just put all of your hopes and eggs into one basket and see what the universe gives you.
I mean, that's kind of how I feel about The Long Walk too, so we might be both bitter, angry people this summer. We'll find out.
Well, it's just one of those things.
Long Walk doesn't come until September.
It's one of those kind of choices, especially in being a nerd and being on the internet. It's like most people that you see hate everything. Oh, this movie was so dumb and it wasn't anything like the comic book. Oh, this comic book was so dumb. They drew the thing like that. And I don't want to be that person, but also so many times I'm like, oh man, this thing's going to be awesome. Look at that. And then I go and I'm like, it wasn't that great. I'm disappointed. So it's one of those things like, how high do you want to get your hopes? So most of the time I go in like very even keel, like, I'll see how it is and I'll make my judgments after I see it. Not this time, darn it. Like every once in a while, you got to go all in on something. And the Superman movie is it for me.
It sounds like you guard your emotions carefully so as to not be disappointed when ultimately things are disappointing. But in this case, no guarding, all in, Rob Cooper.
You summed it up perfectly. Thank you, Dr. Alvarez.
I do that a lot too. And actually, our good friend Frank and Geeks Freaks just did an episode about toxic Star Wars. Yes, Frank, the one we borrowed the shirt from, not Frank the Tank. They just did an episode about
toxic fandom.
Toxic Star Wars fans in particular. And we had an interesting conversation with him because of the age difference. He's about 10 or so years younger than us. How when the episodes 1, 2, and 3 came out, how the younger generation ate it up and loved Jar Jar Binks, and our generation was like, this is dumb. And there was just so many. And even now, when in the recent years, when 7, 8, 9 came out, how much people just hated them and railed against Disney. And they're not the greatest movies, but the original Star Wars aren't great movies either.
No, you can poke hole at anything.
Yeah, but the toxic fandom is a thing. Who cares what they say on the internet and on podcasts? Don't listen to us.
Yeah, don't listen to podcasts. Unsubscribe right now.
And then resubscribe, because we're getting to some nerd mail.
Nerd mail!
I have some nerd mail. I want to highlight some nerd mail from some of our subscribers who heard our call to action and said, tell us what you want this summer and earlier in the season. Tell us what we're missing. So I want to highlight subscriber Ismail, who sent his top 5 villains after our villains episode. And this is
okay. Lay it on me.
This is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 order. Number 5, Prince Humperdinck from Princess Bride.
Unlovable. What? That dude sucks.
But it's a top
Maybe
villain.
That's why. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Number 4, Raul Julia as M. Bison in the Street Fighter movie. Deep cut.
Do you guys remember the Street Fighter movie?
Barely. But now we're going to have to go look it up.
Because that came out after the time of, like, remember all those, like, Van Damme movies and stuff where they were just, like, go to an island and kill people in a martial arts ring? Like, that's Street Fighter, I think, or am I thinking of Mortal Kombat?
You might be thinking of Mortal Kombat.
We gotta see the Street Fighter movie.
Yeah, that's a deep dive, and we're gonna have to go and look at it after this.
I can't remember it. All right.
Number 3, Randall Flagg from The Stand. And in the Stephen King universe, Randall Flagg also makes an appearance in the Dark Tower series.
Randall Flagg sounds like an army general who will, like, bust you and send you out on terrible missions and growl at you about how many Jeeps you blew up.
He's way worse than that.
It's me, Randall Flagg.
Number 2, Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars.
Very good.
And number 1, the Joker. Although, Ismail, you did not say which Joker. Yep. Do you have a particular Joker in mind? Or just, in general, the Joker's a bad dude? So that was subscriber Ismail's top 5. Thanks for sending that in, Ismail.
I love it. Thank you for the listener participation. Beautiful.
All right. And subscriber Los805 recently reached out and talked to me about a video game we missed at this precipice for our generation when the Nintendo had been out for a little while, and then PlayStation comes along, and I think interest in video games for our age started to wane a little bit. Out comes the game NBA Jam. And this was the game that got a little silly because it was not quite realistic, but it came out in 1993, and it is a basketball game based off the NBA, who had the popular NBA players of the time in it. And it would do silly things like, if your player made a bunch of baskets in a row, it would be like, he's on fire. And then, like, his head would literally turn to fire. And
turned to fire and, like,
or the ball turned
basket.
To fire. But, like, something turned into fire, and, like, every shot that person would go after would make, it would do these super, like, close-up ridiculous dunks, and the game was so fun and it was so popular. It really brought people back in, and it's been on every platform ever since.
Absolutely,
all the Nintendo platforms, like, everything.
Arcades. I remember it being in arcades as well.
Yes.
And I also remember having, what year did that come out? Did you say?
93. And it's a 2-on-2. That was the other thing that's different. You have 5 players going around. It's a 2-on-2 game with, like, your 2 favorite players in the NBA.
So I'm going to say probably around 2002. I had one of these Mandela effect moments because I got in a fight, not a fight, but I got into just this shouting match with one of our friends we used to work with, Ahmed, because I was positive that this game was NBA Jams with a Z.
With a Z.
I would have sworn up and I did. I swore up and down. I'm like, you don't. He's like, I played NBA Jam every day for 5 years. I'm like, it's Jams with a Z. It's the 90s, bro. You're crazy. And just back and forth and this and that. And of course, that was like right on the cusp of when phones didn't have like great internet searching your website.
Or you had to pay like $1 million, like $500 to get on the,
right. So we had just an epic argument that probably lasted from like bar to bar to bar with us still screaming at each other because I could have sworn there was a Z at the end of that video game.
And I think the problem is there came out NFL and NBA Blitz with a Z, and those were even sillier.
That's probably what happened. But man, I was just 110% sure, and I was 110% wrong.
NBA Jam was great because it took that format of Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter where it's 1-on-1, except you're 2-on-2. So instead of a, double dribble came out on the original NES, and that was a 5-on-5 game that had special 8-bit graphics for dunks and stuff like that. This took it to a level that is not realistic. You can't see it. And it was a lot of fun. It's so much fun. That's such a fun game to play. And that's such a good call. We totally missed that one. Bringing the nerds back into the gaming consoles at a time we could have been aged out.
Awesome.
I want to bring that up.
Listener mail.
One more, our past guest.
The cup runneth over.
Well, thanks to our subscribers for sure. This is subscriber and past guest Juliana, who upvoted a Daredevil comic book club for the summer. Says, yes, please do this. And I want to watch Neverending Story with Dr. Intern Joan. So that Neverending Story is coming out in June.
Thing.
Yeah, Juliana, thank you. Reach out. See when you set it up to watch it.
It's going to be in June, so we'll set that all up.
Are we going to do a live watch? Because we had gone back and forth on that.
Well,
stay tuned.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. Staying tuned is a good idea. But that's our nerd mail. Thank you, nerds. And it's time we're going to talk about Chew. Chew is a comic book about Agent Anthony Chew. It is written by two guys, John Layman and Rob Guillory. It came out originally in 2009. It won a bunch of awards, like the Eisner Award for New Comic, and turned into a limited series that was 12 volumes. So about, oh my gosh, look at that thick boy. Joan is holding up what would be known as the omnibus, which, how's it pronounced, Rob? Omnibus?
Normally it would be an omnibus. But this is the
omnibus. Because I will say one thing that this comic does great throughout the series is puns on food and eating. I'm going to read the back cover of Volume 1. Tony Chew is a detective with a secret. A weird secret. Tony Chew is sebopathic, which means he gets psychic impressions from whatever he eats. It also means he's a hell of a detective, as long as he doesn't mind nibbling on the corpse of a murder victim to figure out who done it and why. He's been brought on by Special Crimes Division of the FDA, the most powerful law enforcement agency on the planet, to investigate their strangest, sickest, and most bizarre cases. Volume 1 presents Taster's Choice, the first story arc of the sold-out and acclaimed surprise hit comic Chew, a twisted and darkly funny series about cops, crooks, cooks, cannibals, and clairvoyants. That is Volume 1, Taster's Choice. We actually read Volume 1 and 2, but we're going to start with Volume 1 and talk about it. So listeners, the idea was that you read Chew Volume 1 and 2 for this. Now's the time to turn off the podcast and come back after you read it if you've not yet, or if you don't care about reading along while we go through.
Now, I'm going to stop you right there with
go ahead.
Public service announcement, because sometimes, contrary to popular belief, people like spoilers. Like, people will probably listen to this episode, and then if they like what they hear, oh, that does sound like a cool comic book, go back and read it. I think that happens more often than it does people actually turn off their podcast and go read a book and then go listen to the rest of their podcast. However, we love this book. We think this book is hilarious and thrilling and very unique. I have a lot of wonderful things to say about this. However, if you have not read this book, I am going to tell you right now, public service announcement, this book is gross. It is disgusting and icky and gross. So buyer beware. It is also, and this was something I hadn't remembered from 2010 when I read it.
When we read it,
it is full of swears. There's F-bombs all over this. And I wasn't surprised when I saw it. I just didn't remember. It is super sweary and it is gross. So you might just want to listen to us talk about the book and then carefully gauge whether you're going to go read it or not. That's my warning to everyone. It is gross.
That's a fair warning. And also they have the option, if they don't want spoilers, to turn off the podcast and come back later. Either way you want to flex that. Rob is right. It is gross. It is bloody. It is violent in all the really great ways, while still also being somehow often lighthearted and humorous. It's a really great balance. Yeah, it's a really great balance. And we'll get more into that. I do appreciate that message about being gross, because I forgot too. And then I even forgot about, there's a same-sex relationship in the middle of the book that's treated honorably and also very funny. And we get just to the hint of it at the end of volume 2. So we'll talk about all that as we get there. Volume 1, Taster's Choice. What are we going to start with?
Well, I guess the premise of this book is our hero, is a detective for the FDA. And yes, that's the FDA. You're thinking of the Food and Drug Administration of the United States, because in this alternate world, there was a bird flu that affected, of course, poultry. Ripped from today's headlines, there was a bird flu that grossly affected the poultry industry in the United States. And so what they did was they outlawed chicken because people had consumed chicken with this bird flu and died. The story goes that thousands of people died from eating chicken. So chicken is now outlawed, and there is no chicken in the United States. Other countries have also taken on this legislature to remove chickens. And then there's also this kind of underground,
there's a black market.
Well, there's a black market for chicken, but there's also this idea there are protesters and there's this kind of underground rumbling that the bird flu was a lie, or that, something else killed all these people. It was all a big hoax and the government's trying to cover it up with the chicken ban and all this stuff. But it just becomes amazing where it takes all of these ideas from things like the war on drugs, from prohibition, and how crime expanded in those historical things, but put this bent on it that it's chicken and it's poultry, and and it makes it funny. There's always this little bit of humor in all of these things because it's chicken nuggets or whatever it might be.
And all those parallels to human nature of speakeasies, except the speakeasies are serving fried chicken dinner instead of, Prohibition era speakeasy of alcohol. So it does the great job of replicating what human nature would do when government says you can't have this. And people are like, oh, yes, we can. And thus creates the crime organizations, the mob organizations that are all about the black market and making money off of things people want that they're told they can't have. So it's very intriguing in all of that way. And I also want to mention real quick, as this episode is coming out at the end of AAPI Heritage Month, that Tony Chu broke some ground as being one of the first AAPI's main character in comics. Tony Chu does come from CHU, is the family name, and he has a whole family that we meet later in the series. We do meet his brother Chao Chu, and I will say the other great thing about what this series does is it creates this whole world of superhero-esque abilities, but wrapped around food.
They have powers.
Yes.
But they're not heroes.
No, it's superhero-esque,
Nobody in this
right?
book is a hero.
And I'll talk about that as we are introduced to some of the characters, how some of these slides are modeled after this is a shot of a superhero or a villain that we've seen before. And so the parallels are there. They're not treated as superheroes, but the abilities are parallel to superhero. And when we're introduced to these characters, it's parallel to some superheroes, which is really intriguing as well.
I agree. That's one of my first comments about this is they introduced Tony. Best intro in 5 panels I've ever seen. You have everything you need to know about Tony right there.
And it does this thing for the characters. Every issue starts almost like an old school, Silver Age comic where it's here's this character and here's a description about them. But it's also very old school television as well. I can see this in almost like a screenplay for an ongoing television show where you get an intro, that cold open of a character, and then blam, just like you said, everything you need to know about this character on the first page of the issue. So these guys are detectives, and because of this chicken ban, there's all this crime around the FDA. So the FDA are now this sort of policing organization, and to the point where they have detectives and they're investigating murders and crime rings and illegal smuggling operations and those kinds of things. And of course, because our main character has these powers, they're using them to learn information and investigate these murders. Basically, he takes a bite out of somebody, or he tastes the blood of the victim, and he can get these psychic readings of how they died and the last things that they remember. So it becomes super gross. And everything is gross. Not just the idea of like, oh, he took a bite out of a gross, like, dead person's finger or whatever. You mentioned the diversity of characters, and there are tons of people of color, and there's people of all different shapes and sizes, and they are all gross. Like, nobody looks good in this book at all. Even when they do things like, oh, this is like the hot sex pot woman with a super tiny waist and big hips and boobs. It's like, but they look gross because they're just angular and they're like weirdly misshapen. And anytime it shows a belly button, I want to barf. Like, you could count all of the belly buttons in this book. Notice the belly buttons because he draws them like super funky and weird, and there's probably a dozen belly buttons in these first 2 volumes. He's just always putting them in, and I'm like,
a weird thing to notice, Rob.
No, it's definitely a purposeful thing. Like, he's like, you know what? I could put a little bit of gross in everything. Even like somebody gets knocked down and they're laying on their back, they'll do a shot where it's like from the belly button perspective up to the person standing over the body, just so he could draw a gross belly button.
I mean, the art is very purposeful in that way. And there's another way that has nothing to do with belly buttons that I want to mention. I'll just mention now, if you didn't do this in your reading, or listeners, if you haven't done this, start to pay attention to things like newspapers or posters on the wall or flyers on the ground. Because if you are reading this on Hoopla or digital and you zoom in, they are so funny and often have nothing to do with the storyline, but they make fun of themselves. One of them says R. Guillory, who is one of the authors, psychiatric profile over a stack of papers. Sometimes it's funny headlines. Like, it's just so genius, these details they put in. Very much purposeful to make you uncomfortable with the characters and the people in this world.
Yeah, they do a ton of stuff in the background like that. And even to set the mood, one of my favorites is there is a scene in the first volume where Savoy like jumps in with like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle like size and starts like beating people up. And if you look at the build, like if you look in the backgrounds, all the posters on the wall are Bruce Lee posters. And not like a caricature of Bruce Lee, like a straight up actual, like mat of Bruce Lee. There's another one where they break into the place where the cybernetic chicken is, and like they're watching Mary Poppins on the TV screen. And it's just straight up like a copy paste of Mary Poppins on the screen.
That was my question. I'm like, why Mary Poppins?
Why not?
Because he's popping in, baby. We are losing our focus, and I want to put out there that Intern Joan did an amazing job creating a reading guide for us and for listeners. So I will say, like, for myself, I loved it. I had my reading guide out. I printed it out. I had my little pen, and as I was reading, I was putting in my characters and putting in my plot points and all those kinds of things. So I would say it's really fun and nerdy to print that out and use it yourself, listeners.
It's for Patreons.
It's for patrons only. Hey, freeloaders, get your stuff together and go to patreon.com/nerdbestfriends. It just costs a few bucks. You get cool things like custom designed reading guides and bonus. Who knows what other amazing things you're going to get at patreon.com/nerdbestfriends. Anyway, we could follow the guide, and we're jumping all over the place. Do you guys love jumping all over the place, or do you want to
jumping all over the place? But let's talk about the story. I want to say that the first part of Volume 1 actually starts with Tony and his initial partner John, and they are police officers.
John Colby, yes. A food reference.
Cheese, yes. They are police officers, just regular beat cops, and they're chasing a dude that they believe to have murdered some people, and they end up at a speakeasy following this guy, and they're like, we got him, and in comes Mason Savoy, who's this big, burly, older man. I get the idea. I hear like John Goodman's voice when I read him, but I think he's supposed to be a little bit Irish because he uses like lad and stuff like that a lot.
I give him kind of a Sean Connery, like over-the-top Sean Connery voice in my head.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, Savoy is a crinkly cabbage. Just so you know.
Savoy.
That is a
Another
food
food
Another
reference.
food
I did know
reference.
that, yeah.
Absolutely. He pops in and he holds up a badge where this series is going to use FDA, which we've mentioned already, but they use it like the FBI. So the FDA, like an FBI, would come in and say, we have jurisdiction, you need to stop. He's an informant. And what happens in this opening part of volume 1 is they get invited to come in and eat, which Tony Chu doesn't want to because he gets all those grotesque images if he eats animal products. And the running joke throughout the whole thing is the only thing that doesn't give him any psychic visions is beets. So he is a skinny, scrawny dude and hardly eats anything because even it's fruits, vegetables, no matter what, he gets pesticides. And when an apple was picked from harvest or when it's animal products, it's worse. And in some cases, which happens in this opening sequence, the chef cuts himself and some of his blood gets in this soup that Tony Chu ends up eating. He can, just by tasting that, knows that whoever cooked this food and got their blood in it is a murderer. This is who he murdered. This is where it is. Like, he gets those psychic images. And in this opening scene, John Colby gets a giant knife.
A meat cleaver.
A meat cleaver to his face.
head.
You don't know if he's going to survive. Tony Chu gets fired. And then Mason Savoy comes in and puts him and his special abilities in the FDA. And we find out that Mason Savoy also is a bit of a Sebopathic as well.
That is why I think Savoy is definitely my favorite character in Volume 1, because he's not only is he over the top, but we learn that he has the same powers. And so we spend all this time in the first issue or the first volume with Tony Chu and like how tragic it is. These powers are a curse. The only thing he can eat is beets, which are terrible because he'll have all of these psychic things and it's awful. He's this skinny little dude. And then we meet somebody who has those exact powers, but he's this humongous fat dude because he's got no problem at all. And that juxtaposition and the reveal of that is brilliant to me, that they put these two people that couldn't be more opposite with that same powers. The other thing I loved was that death scene that you mentioned with John Colby, because you're in it like, oh, these guys are partners. They don't like each other. They're always at odds, but they're getting the job done and all this kind of stuff. And like, oh, this guy's kind of a dick, and bam, just meat cleaver to the side of the head and he falls down and you're like, all right.
And he's in the hospital in critical condition for basically the remainder of this book.
And they do another brilliant thing in there that I didn't remember. There's a scene where he goes to the hospital and there's somebody in the hospital that's all wrapped up in bandages and he's like pouring his heart out and telling this whole story to. And then we find out like it's the wrong guy and they move the person over to the next room. And I was like, wait, who is this person? Are they introducing a new character? Because in my mind, like reading it, Colby was dead, but then we find out that was Colby.
We also forgot to mention that there's a love story aspect to this, which is we're talking about story.
That's what I was just looking for.
You got a little bit of everything in this story. True crime,
Amelia Mintz,
murder, mince like mince your garlic, people,
and they. Yes. And they call Amelia Mintz, Mintz, but of course the play on the word Mintz is also a food related, and her name makes sense.
I was thinking it was like breath mince, but you think it's mince like chop something.
I'm
it could
thinking
go
both
either way.
Because of her abilities.
I thought because she's like so refreshing and pretty and whatever, it was the breath.
I went with breath mint at first because of her ability. Like you have a breath mint after you eat, right?
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. That makes sense.
So they call her a Sabo Scrivener. And it says that means she can write about food so accurately, so vividly, and with such precision, people get the actual sensation of taste when reading about the meals she writes about. And when we meet her, she's doing purposefully reviews on restaurants that have a D or lower rating with the FDA, and you see just images of people vomiting everywhere because she's describing how awful this food is. Reading the newspaper, And what's great about her relationship with Tony is how it fits in with his inability to eat food, that he can read her descriptions of food and feel satisfied. It hits him in his heart immediately because he can taste the food without having his psychic images. And what a great, again, this whole world, it just expands, by the way. All of these abilities just continue to grow and grow and grow as the universe gets bigger and bigger. But for that ability to be something that is important to Tony Chu is really cool as his love interest. So she's introduced as he's working with Mason Savoy. And then suddenly they end up in some wintry Russian base of some sort.
That really like leads it to this idea of like this expanded universe and the idea of like TV shows and things like that, because it changes locations often, right? We do at the end of the first one, we go to like Antarctica because they found somebody frozen in the snow that they need Tony Chu and Savoy to show up and take a bite out of so they can solve the mystery. In book 2, it goes to some exotic island location and back and forth. So there's a ton of really cool stuff that it does to, again, expand that world. And you're right. Every issue, this is this person. Here's their crazy magic power that they have. And
I love that.
Always in the context of the world with no chicken.
And yes,
so
and
silly.
I love that reoccurring how we meet people. It is a single panel. This is blah, blah, blah. And then a little mini few sentences about what their thing is and then how they fit in the story. And what we start to get in this first volume in terms of that story is we're not quite sure what the FDA is doing. There's these little hints that Mason Savoy is doing something more. He's not quite telling Tony Chu the full story. We have those little hints throughout, and it starts to grow and grow and grow until we get towards the end of volume 1, and they're in like Antarctica or Russia or somewhere with these Russian spies, and there's lots of death and murder in this scene. And then they bring up a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
And we have no idea where vampires fit in, but did that person? I'm pretty sure this is the Russian word for vampire. And Mason Savoy is just really like, don't worry about that. We've got to figure this other thing out. And they take bites of the people and do all those things. They chomp on people. That's the word that's used a lot in the images is chomp.
So then that takes us into, if it's all right, into volume 2, where we really start expanding the world, because there's vampires. There's a dude in a cowboy hat that is sure that he can corner the chicken market by serving people DNA edited frog meat. There's another person on this exotic island who has discovered a fruit that when cooked tastes like chicken, and there's a mystery around that, like it might be some kind of cosmic horror. And then there's of course the people who think that the bird flu was a lie and that we should bring chickens back. There's also legal artificial chicken that apparently tastes like gross, and we really start building out this world. And in those things, just like you're talking about, every episode is like, boom, here's this person, here's their deal, and then we go through. And just like a really good detective series, it gives you all these kinds of red herrings. Like we'll go through, and it could be something like in the background art that we talked about, like they're in a newsroom, and if you look at all the monitors in the background, you can pick up little things about the world and different crimes that are being committed. You can zoom in on like the newspaper headlines and get more about the world. They will say things that are like specific, like giving numbers, like, oh, this island has a population of 6,309 people, and this person ran X and Y kilos of chicken. There's all these like very specific details that don't necessarily mean anything, but your brain as you read it is like, oh, is that important? Oh, is that foreshadowing something? Oh, so when the mystery unfolds, it kind of can keep you guessing in that way. It doesn't just rely on the just outlandishness of the story, because really in this crazy world, the answer to the mystery could be anything, right? And they could just be like, look how wacky it is, but it's not. It follows mystery detective tropes and through lines throughout the whole thing, and is just wrapped in this zany package.
So before we get to volume 2, what becomes notable at the end of volume 1 in this first arc that's really, really important. So we get to the 5th issue, and in this 5th issue, we find out all of those things that Mason Savoy has been hiding come to fruition. And this is, for me, is the first 4 issues really build up this storyline, but this arc really starts to move when you get to issue 5. So I want to read real quick in the first panel of the 5th issue. It's giving us the reintroduction again, as it does in all these issues, of who Tony Chu is. And so you have his little slide, and it says, this is Tony Chu. He is the last Cibopath in the employ of the Special Crimes Division of the US FDA. And so you read that and you go, wait a second. Mason Savoy is too. So it really is opening up with like some stuff's about to go down. A very special agent able to get psychic impressions from whatever he ingests. And as bad as things have been, they are about to get worse. After today, everything changes. And so we go through this issue, and what I really love about the artwork in this, I know we're jumping around, but I want to note that it becomes super important. when Tony Chu figures out that Mason Savoy is not all who he says he is, there is a panel which he confronts him. And as we haven't seen what Tony Chu has seen when he bites the dog or whatever it is that he uses to get that impression, we see in their words, often the bubble behind it will turn red to mean they mean anger. And some of the words will be highlighted in red. And sometimes you'll see that bubble turn cold with like icicle drippings off of it when they're speaking in a chilly voice. But in this case, the panel I'm talking about is when he confronts Mason Savoy outside of the FDA precinct. He's like, I need to talk to you about something. And Mason Savoy's like, oh, whatever. I told you to sleep on it, blah, blah, blah. And then there's just this blank, or there's just this slide of Tony saying something with nothing in the bubble. We're not supposed to know what he says. So he says whatever he says to Mason Savoy, and he says, what did you say, with big red letters? And then the confrontation between the two of them. I mean, it is so brilliant how they write this. And this ends with Mason Savoy on the loose and having ripped Tony Chu's ear off with his mouth. It's again, here's the grossness that Rob's talking about, and threatening Tony Chu's family because he takes a bite. He goes, I see you have sisters and brothers and an entire family, and you better leave me alone or they will suffer. And Tony Chu's pissed. And volume 1 ends with him at a desk in the dark with a light on, trying to figure out who Mason Savoy is and how to find him. That ends the first volume. And then we get to second volume, which Rob described very wonderfully. And I want to note, like, right when we start volume 2, here comes John Colby. Except now he's like, half robot. Yes, he's like a RoboCop. Cyborg,
and half the half of his skull that got chopped off by the meat cleaver is now a robot. Why? Because why not? This world is zany. I was just checking through the credits so we could shout out the letterer. There's not a letterer listed separately, so that's all just part of the art direction. So shout out to Drew Gill, the art director for this book, because yes, that is something notable. Just like you mentioned, they'll also do like ghost word bubbles when there's things in the background or things that are just kind of overheard, and good to point out, because that is part of the craft of a comic book that you don't always see artists taking the time to do. But yes, agreed, it's very effective in this book.
It's extra effective for Mason Savoy, too, because that's when you get him talking to a perp or someone he's interviewing, and then he'll have that super cold bubble that maybe Tony Chu doesn't hear, but we hear him say it. And he's like, really just like when you watch a show or a movie about someone who's maybe a little bit two-faced, they have that like dark moment, and then they're back to their regular selves, and that like chilly word
icicles growing off the bottom of the word bubble is how they do it. And they even tint it with like an icy, like cold blue tint and stuff. Yeah.
Speaking of the art, I can appreciate, Rob taught me this word off the pod, gutters. These artists, they have a panel with the words, and then they have a panel without words, and it just reinforces what happened in that first panel. Brilliant. Like, it brings you into that emotion and lets you sit with it.
It gives you, sometimes it will slow down your reading, and sometimes it provides urgency to speed up your reading. And yes, comic books that can do that effectively are standout books, and this is for sure one of them. Lots of love went into the crafting of this.
And the use of when they use more than one panel, when they use a single page, when they use a double page. Some of my favorite shots are when Tony Chu's eating something, and you get he's in the bottom corner, and you get this like almost Matrix-esque set of screens of the images that he's getting. And some of them will be highlighted, and then some of them will be repeated, and then some of them are like grayed out that he's not quite sure what he's seeing. When he takes a bite of that fruit we talk about coming up in volume 2, he gets this giant cosmic, this is not from this earth kind of vision. Those are really powerful uses of whole pages, double pages, and double panes. There's a scene where I think John Colby it's either John Colby or Mason has Tony Chu up by his like neck or his shoulder against a wall, and it takes 2 panes. So you see how much bigger Mason Savoy is than Tony Chu, and he's holding him up against the wall. So you see on the second pane, Mason Savoy's bottom half, and then maybe Tony Chu's shoe. And in the upper pane, you see the rest of his body and the arm and face holding him up against the wall.
Or they'll not have pane lines at all. I've noticed that too.
Yes.
Like, especially when they're showing like, oh, Tony Chu is this skinny little dude, and then there's like 2 gigantic like Polynesian people around him. Like, they won't even draw the lines, right? They're too big for the panels, right? So it'll be gone. And then a lot of it, like Joan said, will be a very like defined black line panel, and they'll do a lot of really short ones too. increase the pace, right, and give you that dramatic moment. And then sometimes when it's like, oh, this is not just regular gross, this is really gross, they do an effective thing where instead of the square panel lines, it'll be like sharp teeth around the edges. They use that a few times as well. Whenever somebody's like taking a bite out of something or somebody's getting murdered, instead of a rectangle, it's jagged like teeth for the gutters.
So on the reading guide, is there anything else about volume 1 we want to touch on real quick before we go fully? I know we started with this big, good, great synopsis of volume 2. Is there anything we want to cover on the reading guide about volume 2?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
I want to highlight some more food and name references in case our listeners didn't pick them up. Mm-hmm. We're introduced to Senator Hamantaschen, which Hamantaschen is a pastry associated with the Jewish holiday of Purim.
Very good.
I went deep on what these names mean.
I love it.
The Arctic place they went to see this telescope, it's called Gardner Hyashynaya. That's Russian sauerkraut, in case you wondered. And then the planet that they were seeing through this telescope, Tillis 738. Tillis means fattened or well-fed.
I love it.
Very good. I was thinking that, especially with the Russian words. I'm like, oh, I should look these up, but gotta finish the book before the pod.
I fed all of that Russian into Google Translate because I was...
Yes, you did.
It was distracting for me.
Right.
It means what you think it means, but I just really want it.
I love it.
No, I love it.
Very good.
Having the actual translations in my first 2 readings. This is my 3rd reading now. In my first 2 readings, I thought the same thing, but kept reading and never went back to look them up. So thank you for doing that. That's awesome.
I would also say that this is throughout, but the first volume really sets the stage for this line that they've walked with the authority figures that are these cops or these FDA detectives, right? Because they are the authority. They are the jackbooted thugs. The FDA, who, because of this bird flu, has gained all of this power to police and kick down doors and be terrible, right? They're the empire. And I wouldn't say that they're sympathetic characters because they're all like Tony Chu is not a great guy. His partner's a real and his boss is an even bigger a-hole. Like, it is, like, they're all terrible, and we get it. They're shaking down little old ladies in the street because they're trying to get chicken tenders and these kinds of things. Like, they're the bad guys. But the resistance is also terrible. So you kind of see this person like, yes, they're the authority, they're the bad guys, but look at this ridiculous stuff that they have to deal with where it comes to these underground food rings and these protesters who dress like mimes and come in and start shooting people. And like, so it balances this line of like, well, we're not going to root for the FDA to go in and shake down people and not let them eat chicken, but also we're not going to root for the people in this world because they're also gross and weird. Right. So
it's like the mobsters who are trying to protect their ability to make money in the black market. And then you have the protesters who just aren't good people that protest this government regulation over chicken, poultry.
Yeah. Nobody in here is a white knight. And so like we can go ahead and root for Tony Chu because the world he's, enforcing chicken oppression towards is not a good world.
And ultimately, and this is where we get in volume 2, ultimately his job is to find Mason Savoy and also find this vampire. And throughout this volume, there's a lot of vampires aren't real. And when we finally do meet the vampire, we find out he has an ability as well. His ability is to absorb. He can absorb other people's abilities by eating them. So he sharpened his teeth to make it look like he was a vampire. And so he's well known to people who have these special abilities. And he's going around. I think they eventually call him the Collector.
Well, he's not going around. You're going beyond the scope.
Yes, of course. Because we want people to go on and read, find out how we find out he's the Collector. But what we start to see, and he even says at the end of volume 2, like, I'm here to absorb you when he goes after the great Fantaneros.
I believe that's pronounced Fatneros.
It's also a Hungarian mixed meat barbecue, in case you were wondering.
Okay.
So it's definitely Hungarian and not fatten your
I thought it was fatten your ass. Fatten your ass is how I read it the whole time.
I mean, they do talk of him not being American.
Okay.
And this is where, when we meet him, they call him a Sibo-locutor? Sibo-locutor. Locutor? Sibo-locutor?
Like loquacious.
Yes.
Sibo-locutor.
And he's mute, but he can communicate with this food. So you eat his food, and they talk about how he could infuse an entire tragic opera in a 5-course meal, and people get the story of the opera and they get all emotional while they're eating it. And this is where I was talking about it. Maybe I'll screenshot this to show, but this is when I see his introduction with his 8 arms, to me rings very superhero comic book, like we're meeting the octopus, or we're meeting some villain with multiple arms. And that's how some of these characters are introduced, where I was saying earlier, that's parallel to what we would see in superhero comic books. In this case, his 8 arms are doing something different. We're seeing through space and time of him cooking something. He does not have 8 arms, right? Which I thought was very powerful. What else happens in volume 2? We do go to the island. Let's see, I'm going to get the name of the island. Anyone remember the name off the top of their head? Does it have any meaning,
I have
Joan?
it written down on my reading guide. It is the island of Yamapalu.
It does not have a food reference.
Palu, no food reference.
Is it a real place?
I don't think so.
It is not, because I Googled it, and only this island in this comic book is a made-up place. That is the only way it comes.
Perfect. Yamapalu.
And we meet a whole bunch of more characters.
Which we can say, you get the vibe of the island from the names of the people we meet. So we meet the Hinano brothers. Hinano is a Tahitian brand of beer.
Dude, intern Joan. Doing the work.
With the knowledge.
With the knowledge, we meet Police Chief Kulolo, Hawaiian dish of taro and coconut, like bread pudding. The governor of this island, Hawapai, is Polynesian coconut pudding. There's more. I'll chime in along the way. But these food-related references really got me excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. And even without looking that up, so it does both, right? With the names and the words using, you get the feel of this island, but also with the art, right? We see like humongous dudes with tattoos that just evoke the setting right away.
This is also where we meet for the first time Poyo, a special murderous rooster.
Just super briefly.
Yes. And Tony Chu helps release Poyo, not knowing that what he's actually done is intensify this conflict. And we don't know between who at this point.
Because once again, even on this faraway island, Tony Chu has been duped and taken advantage of by a police department to exploit his powers for someone's personal gain, as the chief of police takes Poyo the warrior chicken and skips town, so presumably he can make his millions in rooster fighting rings.
What's the policeman's name? Or no, we already said the name of the chief. Never mind.
We did. And you said it was
Kulolo. With bread
pudding? Yes.
Bread pudding.
I love the character Poyo. We will see much more from him throughout this series. I love the play on the name, Poyo, how it also sounds like the Spanish version of chicken, Pollo, Pollo. There's just so many. Every character name nearly has some sort of layer, and I love the layer of this rooster. And he comes back later in the series and has a one-shot all to himself. He's got a single episode book that came out just about Poyo.
Do you know what went through my mind when Poyo was introduced? That SNL skit about El Nino. El Nino is Spanish for the Nino. It's Chris Farley. Pollo is Spanish for the pollo.
Uh-huh.
It's very true. Volume 2, we also start the romance between Amelia and Tony Chu. He rescues her and his brother Chow from the island, and he ends up calling at the end of Volume 2. He calls Amelia and asks her out on a date. So we have not gotten to that date yet, but this starts that. There's also a hint of showing John Colby and their boss, who hates Tony Chu. I don't think we get his first name. They call him Appleby, which I think,
obviously,
right? Applebee's, or just an apple. Like you can
which
take
is,
it.
Which is I like twist. Because, as we all know, this character is awful, and Applebee's is awful.
It's a great parallel. Yes, there's a hint of a same-sex relationship towards the end of this volume between John Colby and Appleby, and it's really funny because Tony Chu's off and Appleby is on a rampage looking for him, trying to send him. His whole purpose is to send Tony Chu to these awful places and make him chew on awful things, but he can't do it because Tony Chu's gone and he doesn't know where he is. Well, we know Tony's on that island saving his brother and Amelia. He tells John Colby, do whatever you have to do to keep him distracted. And you turn the page and there's a picture of them sleeping in bed together. And then the very next chapter to end volume 2, suddenly Appleby is at Tony Chu's desk screaming at him about making a personal phone call, and Tony's like, yeah, I'm sorry, boss, I was about to call someone. We know now he was going to call Amelia and ask her on a date, but Appleby, instead of screaming at him, goes, you deserve some of your own private time and making sure your life is good. And he like skips away and Tony's like, what is happening? And I thought that was a great
That was
play.
extra shocking because you never guess it. There is not any sort of foreshadowing of that. In fact, it's almost opposite foreshadowing because this character of Colby like uses the F slur multiple times in volume 1. And then when you turn that page and see it, you're like, whoa, what? And then it all starts making sense of like, oh my God, these guys.
It rubbed me the wrong way. He was a little too racist and homophobic. And then I realized, oh, maybe it's internalized and it's his own junk, which we didn't see come to fruition.
Exactly.
Yep. And we see both of those characters change and progress a little bit. And John Colby eventually, I believe, becomes a little less crass once all that starts to happen. But yeah, just it was really funny to see it. And like you were saying, Rob, there's no redeemable character here. And then you see that and you're like, wait, am I supposed to like John Colby now?
No, you're supposed to laugh at the ridiculousness of everything that's happening.
It's such good times. What are we missing? Volume 2.
The women in this book. I mean, in volume 1, there are very few female characters. Volume 1, there are very few female characters. In volume 2, there are much more, and they're just as ridiculously drawn as anything else. And one of the things about this book that is so great is the art style. It's unlike any other book, but it also has it has its own take on comic book art, right? Like the people who are huge and buff and strong like the Hulk are drawn huge and buff and strong like the Hulk, and the women that are supposed to be sexy have like huge, like out of proportion, ridiculous hourglass figures, just like, sometimes in comic books they do. But everything is just in this style and nobody looks the same. That's the other cool thing about it is, when we talk about is the art successful in a comic book, it's like, well, can you tell the characters apart by more than the color of their hair? And it's like, yes, definitely. There's a ton of work to make sure that everyone has a unique color scheme, a unique silhouette on the page, and those kinds of things that go into art design. And when it is the same, right? Well, all these kinds of people from the island kind of have the same silhouette and color scheme, and all of these people from the city kind of have the same silhouette and color scheme, but they're still all different. They all have different faces, and they all have just a little bit different something about them so that you can tell them apart. Right. And so just incredibly successful. And I think volume 2 is an expansion on the good art that we see in volume 1.
The writing of the characters gives them different voices too. So they do it well, not only in the visual art, but in how they speak, especially when you're on this island. The islanders speak a little bit different than Tony Chu and John Colby do. It's sometimes subtle and sometimes really in your face. When I think about how women are portrayed in volume 2, and I do have to expand a little bit later into later volumes as well, because it kind of annoyed me. We have the comic book trope that women are always that ridiculous hourglass figure where their busts are abnormally large, their waists are abnormally small, their hips are abnormally big. They hang that lampshade on an agent that we meet who's super kung fu strong.
Which means what, Joan?
I have no idea. She's not.
Well, that one didn't come up. Okay. I was like, oh, wait.
I don't think it's a food name because she doesn't have food powers. She's got like martial arts powers. And she even talks about like, Tony, you're not going to chomp on me and gain my martial arts powers. And he's like, well, I can't do that anyways. So I think she's heard about she's hinting that she's heard about the Absorber. She's heard about the Collector, and she does not want to be collected by him. And she's out hunting him.
That is great foreshadowing. Good catch.
Yeah, and so she is the annoying lampshade of comic books portrayal of women. And then you get the island women who are big-chested, but they're big-chested like the men are big-chested, and they're larger than, let's say, how they draw Amelia from America.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, so everybody's got a different, Yeah,
they have that portrayal of women. And then Amelia Mintz in these 2 volumes looks like a typical average woman. What I will say that annoyed me later is they start to make her more of that hourglass, comically bigger chested as she becomes his love interest. There are some episodes or there's some volumes that I go, this is not the same Amelia from volume 2. So I don't know if that was purposeful. I don't know if as he becomes a love interest for Tony Chu, maybe that's how he's seeing her, but that does happen later. They're a little less careful with how Amelia is drawn, in whether purposeful or not. It does happen later in the series.
Interesting.
Joan had her thumbs up. Did you?
Joan looked like you were going to say something on that.
No, I agreed with that maybe that's how Tony sees her. Like he becomes more in love with her, so his vision changes.
Interesting.
Too bad it's to the typical trope of women in comic books, but different.
I wonder if it would be more powerful if it were the other way around. And when he first sees her and is infatuated with her, that she would look extra like stereotypically beautiful. And then as you get to know somebody, you get to see how they really look.
That'd be so good.
That would have been intriguing, yes. Instead of seeing it the other way around, but listeners, you'll have to read later volumes to see. And yeah, well, I wanted to talk about
shill for Image Comics over here.
No, not at all. Use Hoopla. Use your local libraries.
That's how I read it.
Yes. Anything else about Volume 2 that we want to discuss, and the cliffhanger it leaves us on to try to get us to read Volume 3?
I think there are I think it does a good job in Volume 2 of introducing plot hooks to go later. Like we talked about, there's the Galsberry fruit, there's the frog thing, there's some kind of like cosmic horror maybe, there's the FDA versus is it the
USDA.
There's a vampire now. There's still these ties to Russia. There's all of these little hooks that it very much felt like what you would see in like a season finale, right? It felt like, okay, Volume 2 is the end of season 1. Come back for season 2 because we've got all of these cool world building plot hooks in the air.
We haven't seen Mason Savoy, but he is mentioned once. There is one mention of Mason Savoy in a character who suspiciously looks like Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction, down to like the 70s. It's so good. Well drawn, but he picks up the phone and says, "Come on, Savoy, answer." And it's like, doo. This number is no longer in working order. And so we know he's out there, but we haven't seen him this entire volume. They're leaving the island. They see it all on fire because the anti people have lit it all on fire. We don't want this fruit. We want real chicken.
They're burning the crop of fruit,
crops.
The fruit that tastes like chicken. They're burning it down at the expense of the island and just raising it because they don't like that this fruit is pushed out their lucrative chicken market. Right. And they think that there's all these like political ties to like, oh, all of a sudden chicken is banned on our island also. And then this fruit that showed up and it tastes like chicken, that's corruption. And they'll burn their own island to the ground to expose it. Like there's some big deal stuff going on. And it's ridiculous because it's about chicken.
It's about chicken. The cliffhanger that we leave at the end of Volume 2 is Amelia Mintz harvesting a small of this plant in her New York City-esque. I think we're like in Philadelphia, but her apartment-esque, little planter outside her window. She's watering it, and you see just the little baby plant that she stole the seed and is now harvesting it. And what's going to happen next?
The invasive species has jumped the Pacific Ocean.
I will say, for readers who are new to Chew, well, let me say this first. Is there anything else about Volume 2 that we want to cover?
Not Volume 2 specifically, but I do have an overall question.
Okay, so before your overall question, what I will say is, for our readers who are new to Chew, the storyline is starting here and it goes, it's so great over the course of 12 volumes. And I think it's about 60 issues, 70 issues. And you meet a ton of characters. You meet a lot of Tony's family, a great way to show an Asian American family and the expectations on him. Like they really get into some cultural things with his family and parts of the storyline and his brothers and his sister and eventually
his sister, who is also named Tony.
Yes, her name is Tony Chu as well.
With an I.
And she has some powers that I will not talk about. I don't want to, gotta read it. But the next 10 volumes are definitely worth the read. Support your local library. Go borrow them from Hoop.
So yours is, if we were going to give this the overall rating, which we do have, is it a skip, borrow, or buy? You say borrow.
I encourage borrowing, but this is one that I bought and enjoy rereading from time to time and remembering this world and this artwork. I would buy it, but also borrow it if you don't want to buy it. At the end of the day, I say read it. It's a must read.
Agree, must read. I originally borrowed mine from the library, and then this Nomnibus was on sale used, and I tend to buy my 5-star things for my library. So this for me, 5 stars.
All right. I'm going to say borrow because I think you're going to know by the end of that first issue whether this is for you or not. And I think it is very clearly for the two of you, and I enjoy it because of the work of art and like the avant-garde things that it does. But again, like, bookend the episode, like it is gross and it's full of language, like, you know, like, oh, must read 5 stars. Like, don't go buy this for your 13-year-old kid for Christmas and be like, oh, I heard this was a great comic book and you're a kid, so here's a comic book. Borrow it, read that first issue. I think the first issue will tell you everything you need to know about this book and whether it's for you or not.
Definitely not kid friendly.
I mean, we were reading things that young that could
Sure,
fit in that category.
but I don't want to be the weird uncle that gave the 10-year-old this book that's full of swears and weird, gross stuff.
Fair.
It's a fair warning. But yes, I would have read this at 13. I was reading Stephen King at 13. This wouldn't have
Sure.
bothered me at 13. But again, yes, it is not necessarily kid friendly. And those of you with younger children that enjoy reading comic books, definitely read it before you decide whether or not it's a good fit for your kid. And it might be. You might have a deranged 13-year-old like I was who loves reading Stephen King.
I was reading Flowers in the Attic that young, so we know it's full of incest. So, I mean, this is fine. But for me, it would have been fine.
That's the last thing on the reading guide. I do have big picture for you is I think there have been rumors a few times that this is being looked at as a TV show. And I think that the world is definitely rich enough that this could be a very cool TV show. Again, it would be very adult. And I don't know, it's gotta be on some kind of like Netflix or HBO, like type of something, because nobody's going to put cannibalism on TV. Like that seems like there's probably rules against that or whatever. But I think it could be very effective. I think it would lose something maybe because it's not real world. Like the art style and the visuals really move this book. And I'm not sure if you'd get that in like a live action television adaptation. But what do you guys think about that idea?
I would personally love it. I'll go first. Sorry, Analese. But I know one of the authors said in 2017 that the animated series was dead at that point. So I don't know any updated information.
They had gotten as far as some scripts and a commitment from one of the subscription services. I probably at the time was maybe Netflix or Hulu. And it was going to be an animated series. They had actors signed up. They had made a big deal about the Asian American they chose to play Tony Chu. And then something happened and it died. And so there's been nothing since then. That was 7 or 8 years ago, and there's been nothing since then. I think it won't really work as a live action because of the grossness of it. I think it has to be animated. And if that's the case, using the same style of art and just animating this comic book, I think you're right. It is so rich in character, in world building, in storyline that it would make a great animated series. And maybe, I've waited 30 years for The Long Walk. Chew might happen at some point.
It absolutely could. It could be revisited, 30 years after. So that'd be what, like 2039? We might look at like, oh man, this is this thing we're gonna unearth and present very differently. So then, not only with that, but I was thinking of that, especially the way like the issues are so episodic, and this works for not only if it were going to be a show, but for the reading of it too, and like the voice you put in your head. I don't know that I ever finished all 12 volumes of this, so this could be a big. Let me know if it's a huge spoiler because something is revealed. But the question I have is, who is the narrator?
That's a great question. I never.
Okay, so because you know what I mean? Because somebody has to say, like, if it's like in your head, somebody has to say, John Colby is a cop and a damn good one. You know what I mean? Because of those intros, like there is a narrator there. So I was thinking like, okay, well, if this is a show, whose voice is that in the beginning opening credits? Is it Tony Chu's voice? No, because it talks about Tony Chu sometimes. Is it this mysterious voice that is like the fruit? Is it a completely different thing where it's like the author? In your mind, who is the narrator? Because the show and the comic definitely has a voiceover that introduces that. So whose voice is that? I
don't think it's a specific character from... It's been a long time since I've read all 12, so you're making me want to go grab 12 real quick and remember how it ends, or remember fully how it ends. But what I will say is I read this narrator in the same way Waylon Jennings is narrating Dukes of Hazzard.
Sure.
It's just a narrator
third-party, omniscient voice.
Yes, it's just someone who's introducing us to this world, not necessarily a character in the world.
So if you were casting it, your actor or voice actor would be a different person than any of the characters in the story. How about you, John?
I agree with that because, Rob, you said at the beginning it felt like kind of an old-timey, like episodic thing. And I immediately went to radio show and how you're in the studio recording a radio show and there's people running to do the sounds and then there's one person who's narrating. So I pictured it in that.
Okay. I was going to be interested to see if that person were ever, or that voice were ever revealed in the story.
I don't think so. But it has been a long time, maybe 8 years since I've read the entire series, maybe 10, maybe about
Because when I
8 to
read
10
it,
years.
I hear, obviously, like, I don't assign a voice, like a character voice to it, but it is certainly a voice that knows these things, and almost, if not every issue, we hear from. And it's a very important thing to set the scene. And again, very old school comic booky, right? Like that could be like, if you think about like the Super Friends from the 70s, right? Like, meanwhile in the Hall of Justice, like
Exactly.
it could be that, like Jonah's saying, like that radio voice. But then I thought also, like, what if it isn't? What if it is somebody in the story?
What a fun storyline to, if they wanted to revisit it and make more story, like from that voice on, maybe it's a bigger picture outside of that world. Who knows? There's
even more than this storyline. And there is more than this storyline. There is a sequel series, I think it's actually a prequel, of Tony Chu, his sister, and her
sister,
adventures.
right? Yeah.
And that one only lasted like, I think 3 or 4 volumes. It was a shorter series.
That's still a
but,
lot of comics.
It is, yes, because each
That's
one of those
more than a
volumes
year's
is 4
worth
or
of
5,
weeklies.
right?
Yeah.
I just mean it's not as long. It's not 12
Or
issues
monthlies.
like original Chu. So they do revisit other parts of that world, and they could continue. It's built so well that you can. It's hard for me to speculate if that voice is someone, because it would require some spoilers that I will not put out there if you have not read the entire series. So what I will say is, from my memory, it is not a particular character. It's a true narrator just telling us about this world.
Well, I would also love to hear from listeners if you found this podcast because you're a Super Chew fan and you have this broader understanding of the whole nomnibus and say like, oh no, that's definitely, like, if you read it again and read that voice in your head as Tony with an eye chew, everything makes more sense. Or, oh, if you read that from the perspective of the fruit, everything makes more sense, like something like that. Like, who knows? So yeah, I'd be interested. And that was kind of a big question that I had while we were reading the book.
Okay, it's summer edition, but I don't know who wants to go first. I'll turn to you, Rob. What's the nerdiest thing you did this week?
So I have somehow turned a corner in the sort of like miniature tabletop community, the hobby community that exists online and stuff. They joke about this thing where there are historical war games, right? So there's all kinds of different like tabletop war games. There's your high fantasy where you're moving around your dudes with your swords and your shields and whatever. There's science fiction where you're moving around your space knights with your giant machine guns and your aliens and your tanks and spaceships and stuff, and like those are fine. But then there's also historical wargaming where you're putting together like these World War II reenactments or your Civil War giant dioramas, and like the joke is like, oh, you know, you're an old man once you like cross over into the historics, because that's what we all see is some like grandpa with a giant, you know, display board in their basement with a reenactment of the Battle of Wichita Hill or whatever kind of thing. And so I haven't gotten that old yet, but I have been making progress on the 3D print project, which is the ship. And you guys, I'm an old man with a model ship. Look at this thing. I've been working on it. It's all built. It's undercoated and like ready to paint more. I've crossed some sort of threshold. I am an old white man with a gray beard working on a model ship in my spare time. It's happening, and I couldn't be more thrilled.
That's amazing.
It looks so cool. I have to like prime my minis and actually paint them. Because you're going to need a color scheme from me soon, aren't you?
I was hoping you would give me one today because I am going to, spoiler alert, I'm going to double dip on this thing. My nephew's birthday, 10th birthday, is coming up next weekend. And what he wants for his birthday party is for his uncle to run a Dungeons and Dragons game for him. And I'm like, okay, one of the encounters is going to be a ship-to-ship battle because I have this cool ghost ship and I've got this thing. So I'm going to put down like the water map. I'm going to have the cool pirate ship with all their middies and then the ghost ship. And there's going to be a thing, and I'm like, he's going to love it. And I'll get like a little extra use out of my model ship that I'm having so much fun painting. So that's happening like this week. I got to get at least enough paint on it that it can.
Okay. Okay.
that it can look
I
cool
can,
on that.
I can look
And
at
I can always add your colors later, but if you know,
Yeah.
if you think about them, let me know.
Think about it. That's awesome, though. The ship looks awesome.
Thanks.
And at least it's a goblin ship. I mean, you were comparing yourself to like war reenactment. It's a pirate ship.
No, I mean, like, it's a regular frigate. Like, there's nothing goblin about it.
Until there are goblins.
Until we put goblins on it, and then it's a goblin
It's a
pirate
goblin ship. Good
Let's go to
stuff.
Joan. Joan, what's the nerdiest thing you did this week?
I texted you guys this week all excited. As of we're recording, Amazing Race ended, and the two people that won are D&D fanatics. They call themselves nerds. Carson McCallie and Jack Dodge. I'm going to shout them out and tag them in the show notes of this episode. Maybe they'll pay attention to us. They have a podcast called Dweeb Wars. They won, and their friendship through the whole thing was amazing. Apparently they went to therapy to prepare to win this race so they could communicate under pressure. And one of the final events that they had to compete in was getting into an entire knight uniform and do archery. And one of them was practically crying, like, this is my D&D character's like real life bucket list. And I was just...
Joke's on you. I've been prepping for this for 20 years.
I was just so thrilled for them to see and how proud they were of that identity and how proud. Yeah.
That's great.
It was great to see them win.
That is hardcore. They went to therapy to prepare themselves for the competition. That is, I mean, it's smart because you see all the time the closest of friends get into big, stressful, like freak out moments. That's wild.
But it's also like kind of that next level of these games. Like, I don't really know much about these reality show competitions, but that's taking it to a serious level. Like when we talk about sports psychology and like professional teams that want to win will do things like that, right? So
they'll do mindfulness
that
and
does recognize a new level of competition.
Professional reality show.
Right.
Game, recognize game.
Yeah. I know, it's just really fun. Reality show, and Big Brother's gearing up this summer to start. So if anyone wants to hear about Big Brother, also a nerd for that one. It's coming.
Beautiful. Well, congratulations, nerds, on winning the amazing race and representing nerds everywhere.
I hope that's a clip. What about you, Analese? What's the nerdiest thing you did this week?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we talked about it a little bit towards the end of the season. This week, I went to Universal Fan Fest with my brother and sister, and my goodness, it was a really good time. And I think Universal deserves some props for putting together this fan fest. So the pinpoint of the fan fest was to recreate 1950s Hill Valley down on their lower studio lot, which is where some of those scenes were filmed. So they actually have some pictures as you have to go on the little tram down because it's where the tour is. So if you do the tour during the regular part of the day, you go through you get to see a little bit of Hill Valley as part of it now. But you take the little tram down and they show you some scenes from when they were filming Back to the Future 40 years ago on this lot. So it was 40th anniversary. So they recreated this and they did something different that I haven't seen anywhere. And what they did is recreate iconic parts of the film from the 1950s scenes, active right there in front of you, interacting with people who are there. So when you first get down there, there's all these photo ops, line estates, and the billboard where he hides the DeLorean behind when he first gets to the 1950s. They have the clock tower thing, and they have one lady say the Save the Clock Tower lady, and you can write your name on the thing, and she gives you a flyer like she's handing out in blue paper like she's in the movie. It's just a photocopy of that same thing. So I have one of those like hanging in my office now.
Super cool.
It's super cool. And so you have all this, and then the story starts to play out. So when you first are down there, you see Marty kind of hiding behind the like sign, like when he's first crossing the street. You have the gas station right there with attendants and some old timey cars there. And he's kind of hiding, and you see Biff and one of the other bully guys are walking out, but they're talking to people. And George McFly's out there with his like stack of books, and he's all nerdy and just talking to people. And Lorraine's out there, and he's, George McFly's over here talking about how pretty what's her face is, and Lorraine, thank you. And Biff is bugging Lorraine, and like this is all happening, and they're talking to people who are they're
guests.
Yeah. They're just interacting with people. And, the dude they hired, it's multiple. We were there long enough that you see multiple sets of actors. They don't, because they do this for 5 hours. They do this rotation 5 hours.
Oh my gosh, these poor people.
Over and over and over. So I think they have
reset.
That's exactly what they do. But I think that the next crew comes out and does the next one, and they go on a break. And then I think there's 3 crews total. So, the dude playing Biff is just like bullying people. Like they hired the perfect dude, and we saw him twice. Perfect dude to just be a jerk to people. And I actually have a question for you all. And Rob, you're both Back to the Future fans. So my sister really, really wanted one of us, me and my brother, to go up to the guy playing Biff and say hi to your mom for me. And
wonderful.
And I was like, but that's old Biff that says that. 1950s Biff doesn't say that. And she's like, well, I'm going to go do it. And she does it. And we're walking away. And she goes, hey, Biff, say hi to your mom for me. And he goes, well, she's dead, but thanks. And I'm walking away going, that's not canon. When do they ever talk about his mom being dead? Then I realized, oh, he lives with his grandma.
He lives with his grandma. Yeah, no, he doesn't have parents.
No,
they never talk about them being dead, but like he was right in canon.
They talk about it in the newsreel in Back to the Future 3 when they're doing his history. I don't know.
We'd have to go back and look whether or not that's canon. But I walked away and my brother's like, what do you mean by canon? I'm like, bro, you listen to our podcast. You know what I mean by canon. Is that part of his storyline that his parents are dead? I thought it was real interesting, but that's the kind of stuff.
I mean, that makes sense because like that's an easy jump to get to, that he lives with his grandma because his parents are probably dead. It was the 90s. People die of all kinds of stuff.
Right. And so that was really interesting because he was clearly trained to be in character. He knew the background story of his character. Like, I thought it was really well done. And the guys who played, that one guy we saw that plays Marty McFly, super nerd and geeky. And, you know, someone walked up and handed him a thing that was one of the poems from he's, I've read a poem like this before. And he's like flipping through his stuff. Like, they just interacted with people there. And then they reenacted scenes, you know, they chased Marty. And what was really funny, because a lot of people were cosplay, a lot of people cosplayed as Marty McFly. So they all are wearing puffy vests, and they sold one at the the little shops. Yeah. They sold one that said Back to the Future 40th, and that's the right color. So a lot of people were wearing them. So when they're chasing him around the square, he'll jump and like the actor who played Marty McFly jumps in front of him, counts to like, you see him go, and then he runs away. So the character playing Biff grabs the like random fan who's there and flips him around and goes, you're not that butthead. And he goes running, and he'll find 3 or 4 people whose backs are turned to him and grab them and turn them around. And like some people are actually like, what did I do? And he's like, get out of my face, butthead. Like, just, it was so good. And they they had the whole Enchantment Under the Sea stage, and they had the guys coming out playing songs that were played in the movie. And then he comes out, Marty McFly joins them on stage, and they have the dude playing the principal there who's like introducing the dance, and they play these songs, and then they start playing the song, and there's this whole scene of George McFly punching Biff, and then this whole scene where they're not dancing because Lorraine gets pulled away and Marty McFly starts to disintegrate on the stage. Like, they redo the whole thing. It was so much fun. It was so much fun to see, and it was wild.
Sounds like what they've done is they've taken decades of what they've learned doing their, did they call it like Hollywood
Halloween
Fright
Horror
Nights?
Nights?
Halloween Horror Nights. Like, they've taken the decades of like what's successful about that and put it into this completely different like fan experience. And that sounds wonderful.
And then at the very end, and like you could just watch, like at one point we saw like 3 cycles, not full cycles, but partial cycles of it, because we went back and forth. I stood back on one end and just watched the crowd move from the different parts of the scenes going on. So the last time we were there, my brother's like, let's go to the clock tower so we could be at the front. And so you go at the end, and what they do is play the final scene in the 1950s with the storm and Doc like trying to put the thing together. They play that, and then they reenact. They have fireworks coming off the clock tower building, and then you look over and they have the 2 like on fire with the out of time thing spinning around. So they did a really good job, and that was the pinpoint. So this is a lot of nerdy thing, but that was the main feature. But throughout the park, they had a D&D experience, which I'll talk about in a second. They had an anime, and I kept calling it katsu, but I knew that was wrong because that's like food. My brother was really excited about it. So they had this anime thing happening. They had something called One Shot or One something that I knew nothing about, but we went to it anyways. And they had, what am I missing? Back to the Future, Dungeons & Dragons.
Star Trek.
They had a whole Star Trek experience, which was like you were saying, Rob, it reminded me of Halloween Horror Nights, where you're going in scene to scene to scene and there's a story to follow, except it wasn't scary things jumping out at you. And it wasn't murder scenes. You were going through Starship Enterprise and something was happening and you were trying to escape these pods while they were being overtaken. So it was all these really put together sets and storylines and actors in the full gear acting out the storyline. And you just got moved from room to room, and they were small groups. So it was never too super crowded. Yeah. So, and then the last one, when you're on the bridge, they're like, hey, the story's over, everybody. Now's the time. If you want to take some pictures, just don't cross these barriers. And some people were like taking pictures of them on the, so that was really cool. And then they had photo ops throughout the park. One of them was the captain's chair, which was over in a corner by some restaurant. So you could sit in the captain's chair and stuff like that. I mean, Universal did a really good job of putting all this together. I hope they do more of it. I hope they find more iconic films to recreate, that it's not just Back to the Future every year, even though that was super fun. It was a really good day. But the Dungeons and Dragons.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Was so cool. And I have pictures and video to show you. So all of their artifacts and posters on the wall, I'm like, I know that weapon. I've seen that. Like,
really?
It was as if someone did a doctoral thesis of Dungeons and Dragons, and every room was maxed out in something D&D related. The props, the characters, there was a tiefling and a bard, and he had the little lute on his back, and they showed a video of the different characters. And here's the point: they had overhead. They made it a screen that looked like you're in a tent, like an old timey tent, like canvas material, and they used that to project a dinosaur landing on top, and then lit different parts of the room with a flame. And they were interacting with the crowd. In fact, one flame was right behind me. I was like, "Whoa!" And the guy's like, "Are you all right?" I don't remember what he called me, like, "Party member, are you okay?" And I'm like, "I took damage." And he goes, "Roll for damage." And so I like fake rolled. "How much damage did you take?" "A lot." Like, they interacted with the crowd, and there were some super nerds, super D&D nerds. Like, I'm a D&D nerd. There were super nerds who were just yelling out stuff. The spells they cast, they had everybody in the party do a vicious mockery to one of the bad guys. Yeah, they had a wizard, and like, it just was so cool. It was immersed in D&D. It wasn't cheesy.
Interesting, because I was wondering if it was going to be like the movie, right? Like, because the Honor Among Thieves movie came out, and like, was it? No. Okay. Well, that's better movie for me.
Right? I don't think it's their movie. So they wouldn't, if it was their movie, they probably would have done it based off of that, but it's not their movie.
Gotcha.
So
because I was like, not very interested in that. But if you're saying it's like magic weapons from, decades of history and all kinds of cool stuff like that, that sounds very appealing.
I do think it was a real, I'm like, if you were there, I think you would have known what the adventure was, because I know the name of the dude we saw. Hold on, I'll show up the picture again. I had texted it to you. I think you know who this is.
That's Xanathar, the Beholder.
Right, and so we had to do vicious mockery. Like, this thing is huge. I'm standing right in front of it.
That's super cool.
Huge, and he's moving and stuff.
Awesome. I'm actually playing that adventure on every other Tuesday night with Michael and his gang.
And here's they had someone else. They did a spell. I made videos, so I just haven't made a video of it yet. I'll show it to you when done. But I took videos of the adventure, so like, you can't hear it, but here's the shot of this guy talking.
That's cool. Animatronic Beholder.
Yeah, it was really cool. So it was steeped in D&D. It was real. It wasn't cheesy. My only wish is that there were more. It was that one adventure, and that was it.
I see. Interesting. I wonder how long it's going. Through the summer, you think?
I think this is the last weekend that we're recording right now.
Okay. Well, I was thinking like, well, when we finish it and we actually do go and we defeat the Xanathar with vicious mockery, maybe the crew could meet up and go, but I think we're going to be out of time.
Yeah. I hope that they do this again. I think this might be the second time Universal has done this fan fest, and I think they're starting to hit their groove. They sent a little survey after where I said, like, we were on a soundstage for the D&D thing. It was so well done. Like, more of this, I would go to Halloween Horror Nights if it wasn't guys jumping out at you. I would love to walk through these mazes of scenes professionally done in Hollywood and recreating the scenes without Michael Myers running after me with a knife, right? Like, take out that jump scare factor, and I would start going to Halloween Horror Nights again, because I don't like the jump scare.
Yeah.
It's just not fun.
I mean, clearly they make a lot of money off of that. So I don't know that that's going to go away. But like you were describing, it sounds like this is just the other side of the coin to that. And so we'll see what movies are having an anniversary coming up that they could go through. Because if it's everything lined up where it was like, 40th anniversary of Back to the Future and 50th anniversary of D&D and 25th anniversary of Star Trek The Next Generation, like, let's put forth this package 2 years from now or whatever, or on maybe even what's the next 2030, there'll be a whole nother suite for them to do something like that.
I would go back in a heartbeat. And I will say we bought a level pass that we got into the park at 2:00 and we got to do regular park stuff. And then at 5:30, we had a 2-hour early admittance to some of these FanFest stuff. Pass level also got us, they don't call it Fast Pass, but their version of Fast Pass. We got to go to the front of the line of each ride once. So we used all of that up. And then, so by the time we hit about 9:00 and FanFest doesn't open till 7:30. So everyone's trying to rush around and do all the things because it was open till midnight or 2 a.m. or something ridiculous like that. We were ready to go at 10 o'clock. So it was perfect for us as the crowd started to get bigger as it got later. It was also really hot that day. We were there during a heat wave. So it was probably like 85 or 88 during the day. It started to cool down in the evening. But I would do it again in a heartbeat. It was so much fun.
Very cool. Good for you. I'm glad I know it took a lot of I got to travel, I got to coordinate with my family, but what a cool thing for you and your family to do and share with us. It sounds really cool.
Yeah. That was my long-winded nerdiest thing, but well worth it because it was fun.
It's so fun. And there's still time for our listeners to plan a weekend up to Astoria, Oregon, June 5th through 8th. Goonies is having its 40th anniversary fest. And so you could tour locations and go to speaker panels. And if you love Goonies, look it up.
Huh.
Heck yes. Amazing. 40 years of these things. We're officially pretty old.
I have a model boat.
All right, nerds, thank you for joining us for Catching Rays and Sidequests, all about Chew Volume 1 and 2. Our next episode is The Nerds of Summer. We are going to watch Neverending Story for Dr. Intern Jones' first stab at watching this movie. So join us there. That will be released June 11th, patreon.com/nerdbestfriends. Current subscribers, there may be a live, so keep your eye out for a notice on that. Dr. Intern Jones, Rob, great doing a nerd book club with you during the summer.
Awesome. First of many, I hope.
Woo, woo. All right. See you next time, nerds.
Thank you. What are you flopping around over there?
Oh my gosh, it's embarrassing. It's an eggplant stress ball, but it's really funny because it's an eggplant.
Okay, right? I was like, what's going on over there?
I accidentally show it in session sometimes, and clients are like, what's happening over there? And I was like, oh, shit. This is the kind of therapist I am.
I've got an eggplant stretch squeezer. I can't show it on camera.
Stop.